Welcome back to another exciting episode of 60 Plus Uncensored. I'm your host, Seb Fry, and today I'm joined by Tommy Steed, whose career began in 1971, the year that I was born, with the New York Telephone Company as a cable splicer in Bronx construction. He was on the front lines during major recovery projects, including the 1975 telephone company fire that became a national priority. A lifelong member of the Communications Workers of America, Tommy went on to organize with Local 1120 and later became chairman of the Association of Belltell Retirees with about 130,000 members, where he continues to fight for pensions and retiree benefits. Hey, Tommy, thanks so much for joining me here on the podcast today. How you doing?
Oh, welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm happy to speak to you this morning.
Right on. Okay, so for those in our audience who may not know who you are, could you give us a little introduction to yourself? Like, who is Tommy Steed and what are you all about?
Okay, I am the chairman of the 130,000 Association of Belltell Retirees. We're former employees of AT&T and Verizon. And I'm a native New Yorker. I grew up in the Bronx, just a few blocks from the New York Telephone construction garage. As a matter of fact, there was a baseball field directly across the street from the telephone garage that I played Little League Baseball in as a child. And, you know, I just, used to see all the men that used to roll out of the garage in their green trucks. It was all pretty much green was the color of AT&T in those days. Like I said, we had outside the United States government, postal service, EMS, military. We had the largest fleet of vehicles on the road in the United States because we had 1,009,000 employees of AT&T on its last day, which was December 31st, 1983. So divestiture happened January 1st of 1984 when we were broken up into 7 regional Bell operating companies. Now, my company became NYNEX, New York, New England, and the unknown X Factor. Now I worked as a cable splicer and a linesman in the Bronx. And, it was Bronx construction. It was all outside work. We either worked underground in manholes or we worked aerial overhead, in setting poles in power, which I thought was the most dangerous, 13,200 volts. You don't even have to touch it. It'll arc out and hit your pole at the top if the weather is damp or anything like that and it's anywhere grounded. So, but then manholes also had their own dangers, especially natural gas, because you're underground, the gas lines are underground, and gas lines leak. And I know a few guys that were blown up in manholes. Basically, it's just a flash fire. You're knocked unconscious if you're lucky. And I worked for over 32 years. I was in my 33rd year when I retired, and I worked real one of the most hazardous jobs that I was on was the 1975 New York Telephone 2nd Avenue and 13th Street fire, where it took over a day for the fire department to put the fire under control, and 699 firefighters suffered everlasting effects of that fire. It was matter of fact, my friends told me that were fire department, service workers. Their medical files were stamped with a red star, a unique red star, and that red star was the red star of death to them because they all
Oh,
developed,
wow.
many of them developed cancers. I mean, died prematurely, late 40s, early 50s. Just from that one job, which They basically called everybody in the city that wasn't fighting a fire. 699 firefighters fought a fire in one building, right? So, like the World Trade Center attacks, many of our members were also first responders to, these examples. I retired at age 54, but I knew I wasn't finished yet, of course. Was still relatively young. We all started at New York Telephone, in our early 20s. So by the time we were in our early 50s, we had over 30 years service. And I was a member of the union, a shop steward, and later on, I became a union organizer for my local 1120 in Poughkeepsie. And when I saw the association, the union sent me to school to train me to organize, okay? And when I saw the structure of the association, both management and craft, because you need the whole ball of wax from top to bottom, I happen to be craft on the bottom, but I saw a model for organizing that we could never have in AT&T because management could not join a union. It was not allowed in private company. In public service, you can have managers in unions, but in private companies, they say it's a no-no, it's a no-no. So for this first time, management and craft could work together to develop strategies, to protect our pensions and benefits and address the company on several fronts, especially we had 3 Verizon shareholders proposals that we won by over 50%, which is a record. That's an all-time record in America. It's like David versus Goliath, if you can, figure that out. Along the way, I earned a bachelor's degree in labor studies and a master in public administration, which public administration is government, nonprofit, unions, it's the great thing about it. Verizon, I never paid a single dollar tuition. Verizon paid 100% of my tuition for every one of my degrees. 100%. I mean, I did have to buy textbooks. I'm not complaining. No big deal, But really wonderful company. We all worked for. We loved working there. And so after retiring, I figured I would, continue as an advocate, especially as of late, we've been looking at occupational safety and health, OSHA, because a lot of outside linemen get killed. I mean, especially power linesmen. Safety is the number one issue. So, there were, it takes, you're all right. If you work in an office, you can work, I believe, till you're 65. But if you work outside, especially in the winters for over 30 years, it starts taking not only a toll on your body, but your mental aspect. You start forgetting to put a chock under the rear tire of the truck so it doesn't roll. You just start losing it, and that's when I figured I had enough at that time. But so anyway, I became a member of the board of directors in 2012, and I was elected chairman almost 5 years ago. I think the companies these days, when I was in two, let me see, in 1987, I had high levels, 43 micrograms of lead poisoning, and from working with lead cables, the sheathing, they weren't black in those days; they were gray. They were lead sheath cables, and the only way I found out about it was I finally received this phone number, and I remember the lady down at Company Medical in Manhattan said, "But it's a long distance number." And I said, "Lady, I don't care if it's Singapore. I want to call and find out, you know, what's wrong with me, you know?" And of course, I work for the phone company, so I call long distance anyway for at the central office. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything, but it was the New York State Department of Health in Albany. And when the lady picked up the phone, she said, do you know who you're talking to? I said, "No, I don't have a clue." She goes, "Yeah, we're the New York State Department of Health. I got your file right on my desk. You have lead poisoning." And but they didn't really take any remedial action. Like, in other words, they didn't tell me don't work with lead anymore. The company, we were disposable. Even though their best resource is their human resources, we are disposable, as employees. But so in 2008, I developed stage 3 lymphoma. But they saved me, thank God. But that was a horrible experience. Chemotherapy every 3 weeks for almost 4 months. It was really knocks the hell out of you, But yeah, we're right now the biggest issue for corporations is pension risk transfers, whereas a defined pension benefit that's federally protected under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, ERISA, you lose all those protections when you go to a private insurance company, like as an annuitant, such as Prudential is a big company that takes on these pension risks from corporations, not just Verizon, IBM, General Motors, a whole bunch of them. It's billions. I mean, the last time I looked, it was $500 billion. Almost $500 billion have been transferred, from corporations to insurance companies. Now, in 2012, when Verizon transferred 41,000 management pensions to Prudential, we went to court. We had to go to court in Texas because that's where their main office was, and we were denied, but that opened the door to go to the appellate court, which was in New Orleans. It's really, I don't know if you ever saw the movie My Cousin Vinny. Louisiana, Alabama is not a good venue to go to court in. If I don't want to use the term redneck, but it really is highly conservative, far right, and we were denied in Louisiana. But that opened the door to file a petition with the United States Supreme Court, and we did. And the United States Supreme Court said our petition had merit because it affected so many tens of thousands of United States citizens. It was a constitutional issue. Now, the way it was explained to me, the United States Supreme Court gets about 800 petitions a year, mostly from prisoners on death row. They have nothing to lose. The state or the federal facility has told them it has to pay all their fees, their lawyers' fees, filing fees, everything else like that. Out of the 800, the Supreme Court only hears 80 a year. Now, no, wait a minute. Yeah, 80 a year, and we were one of them. So we were lucky. We got into the court. We got our foot in the door, but we lost a 5-4 decision. Of course, for liberal justices, five, conservative justices. So, but that's what we do. That's what the expertise we have to represent people that can't represent themselves. I mean, if you're a single person, where do you get the resources and the knowledge and the expertise to go to the Supreme Court? You can if you really try hard enough, but getting in the door is another matter. They really don't. They don't have to answer to the president. They don't have to answer to the Congress. The Supreme Court is jurisprudence unto itself. It doesn't answer to anybody except each other. So, I mean, that was a significant thing. Even though we lost, we took it all the way as high as we could take it, and tenaciously we held on to it. So, we see more unfortunate trends in the industry, like there were 96,000 pension spinoffs in 2023. AT&T announced they're going to end landline service. Now, I appeared before virtually. I appeared virtually before the California Public Utility Commission. And, I told them, I said, hey, look, there's 3 grids in the United States. East of the Mississippi, west of the Mississippi, and Texas is its own independent grid. 3. If all 3 grids go down, you can pick up your phone, a light will go on, and you'll have dial tone, because as soon as commercial power is lost to our central offices, our generator back batteries kick right in, and we supply direct current. We supply our own power. So it really is a lifeline. The last lifeline could possibly in America. So it's become important more than ever for people my age. I'm 76, and if you're watching this, you can volunteer in your community. You can go volunteer in your church or place of worship. They're always looking. Go to a town meeting. They'll have committees for everything. They'll have parade committees. They'll have barbecue committees that they need people to actively participate in it to make it work. So, if you ask yourself, you're retired, and you say, what's next? Volunteer. You have the luxury of the free time that you've never had during your working life because you were so busy. And it really is a luxury, and it's really a worthwhile endeavor to volunteer for the good, especially in your community. And, in retirement, I'm also a beekeeper, a honey beekeeper. I have an apiary with 25 honeybees, which in July I have about height of, the queen laying eggs and newbies being born, thousands a day, I have up to about 1.5 million bees, my 25 hives, in July. I mean, that capacity reduces, of course, in the winter when the queen stops laying eggs, because the days are getting shorter and the cold's coming. Interesting story I read about a woman in Southern California. She lives in a condominium, and she came out to her parking lot, and she had the whole trunk of her car and rear window covered with a swarm of bees. Tens of thousands of bees. So she figured, I'll get rid of the bees by taking the car on the freeway and they'll blow off. Well, she went out on the freeway 60 miles an hour, came back to the condominium. They were still there. So she called a beekeeper, exterminator, whatever, and he came and he said, wow, this is simple. Open the trunk. The queen was in the trunk. They would not leave the car. The queen flew out of the trunk. The swarm took off after the queen. And that was the end of her problem. So, it's a bit of an eccentric hobby. Don't get me wrong, but then we all get a little eccentric after we turn 60, in our old age. But
Is that true? Everyone gets a little eccentric after they turn 60, you think?
oh yeah, you wouldn't believe how many of my well, besides the farmers that I know, how many retirees I know that are beekeepers, and they're master beekeepers. We have beekeeping societies or clubs that we attend meetings once a month, and we lend our expertise and our experience and current, problems, solutions, things like that. So, yeah, that's what happens when you retire. You volunteer, you get a hobby, you travel, you have the freedom to travel, but you want to stay active. You just don't want to. You want to grow old, but you don't want to sit around and grow old. You want to walk into old age, or hopefully trot, or run. But that's my story. I'm sticking to it. But if anybody wants to understand what I'm talking about and being a retiree advocacy group, you can Google the Association of Belltell Retirees. You don't have to be a former worker or retiree of a telephone company to join us, but we speak to national issues. Especially Social Security, your medical benefits that you retired with, because people. I mean, I spoke to a woman last week. She was 91 years old. All right. And what happened was Verizon raised the pre-Medicare retiree premium. And of course, she got all shocked and worried. And she called me up. Oh, I'm going to have to, how am I going to be able to afford this? And I said, wait a minute, hold on. I go, you got to read it again. It's for retirees after 2013. Well, she retired in 1996. I said, you're safe. You're on Medicare. You're not pre-Medicare. You are Medicare. But it seems that our office becomes an emergency room. For traumatic events like retirees. If nothing happens, no news is good news. That's great. But if something happens, the phones start ringing off the wall, and we take the people's call, their information, and we find a solution for them and tell them, what it is. It is what it is. We research it before we answer to anything. So, I guess, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, I guess, So, but you got any questions, Sebastian?
Well, right on. So, yeah, sure. I got a ton of questions. So you said in December 31st, 1984, AT&T ceased to be what it was, which was Ma Bell, right? Are we talking about Ma Bell here? Like Ma Bell ended?
Exactly. Ma Bell, December 31st, 1983 was the last day of Ma Bell. January 1st, 1984, we were split into 7 regional Bell operating companies
Into the Baby
across the United
Bells.
States.
Into the Baby Bells. And so
Right.
out here
Baby
we had
Bells.
Pacific Bell, right? Pac
Yeah.
Bell. And you had 9X, right?
Yeah. And then we merged,
Yeah.
9X merged with Bell Atlantic, which wasn't bad, New York, New Jersey, right? And then Bell Atlantic, very short time later, less than 2 years, merged with GTE to form Verizon. From starting with a little subsidy company like New York Telephone back in 1971, bigger is not better. the smaller, the tighter the group of people, the more autonomy you have. You know, the bosses are the bosses. You know what I mean? They can make command decisions. And they were all good people. I tell you, I worked for some of the greatest men and women in the world. And I really appreciate what they gave me, and how they treated us all fairly. So yeah.
So that got broke up in December 31st, 1983. Do you think that was a good thing? I mean, you just said that you think bigger is not necessarily better, but like a lot of people would say there are like natural monopolies, right? And telephone might be one of those, right? Because in many countries there is only one phone company. So what do
Right.
you think? You think that was a good thing or a bad thing
I
for
think it was the worst
Ma Bell to be
thing.
broken up?
I think it was the worst thing the United States government ever did to the citizens of the United States. When you had one uniform company, everything was identical, right from New York to California. There was no crazy mix-up of, equipment and employees. It was like a universal system. The Bell system, it worked. Um, we had our own Bell Labs in New Jersey, and we had brilliant engineers at Bell Labs, and physicists, scientists. I mean, don't forget, we put a satellite in orbit 2 weeks after our government launched its first satellite. That's how far advanced we were. I mean, I probably know for that we helped them. Okay, come on, you got to get up. We got to get our telecommunications satellite up. And we don't want to make you look bad, by launching first. So everything was perfect up to that point. I thought in America, as far as telecommunications, and like I said, the confusion of getting bigger is not better. It's just more complex. It's not as simplified as the Bell system was. Although it was a very complicated system, it was uniformly simplified, and I thought it was a great thing in America. I mean, there was another.
So how did they chop it up, right? Like so, like okay, you have these 7 bells, right? But there was all the same wires that went to all the same places, right? So like, how did that work to divide them into like? Because it used to be one. I mean, it's physically one. How did that actually work?
Well, all right. Well, 9X became New York, New England, X Factor, the unknown. Now, we became one Bell operating company, okay? When, say, you made a long distance call to California, well, those are called toll calls because you were charged for long distance. So when the call, say, left New York City and went to New Jersey, well, New Jersey got a piece of the revenue from that call. When it left New Jersey for Pennsylvania Bell, you know, uh, well, actually, it wasn't Pennsylvania Bell. It was, oh, anyway, all the way Mountain Bell, all the way to California. Everybody took a small piece of the long distance call. So it was traffic. It was monitored toll traffic, you know. And we shared resources. We shared, long distance cables. We even had our own transoceanic cable laying ship called the Long Lines. And it laid transatlantic cables to Europe and Asia, South America. I mean, AT&T had it all. Let me tell you, just a whole ball of wax.
So how did that plant get all divided up, right? I mean, all that infrastructure. How
Okay.
did all that? Because it was one system, and then
Yep.
like, could they just capitalize these corporations and just like, were they each endowed with $1 billion, or how did all that actually work?
Right. Judge Green's decision was in August of 1982. And he said, I'm going to give you 16 months until January 1st of 1984 to divide up all the assets. Now, all the assets were every single thing. I mean, all the vehicles, all the real estate, because we had a lot of offices and central, telecommunication offices going from here to the Pacific Ocean. And that was probably the most difficult thing of the breakup, dividing all these assets up into what company is going to get everything that's within their geographic area, and determining those assets. I mean, right down to the last telephone pole. They didn't miss anything. And once it took 16 months, but don't forget, we had an army of accountants, engineers, craft working on this full time. And we got it done. We were able to give the judge, a plan that would work equitably for all of the 7 Bell operating companies. I mean, some employees were transferred to other operating companies, but pretty much everybody kept their job. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I was considered construction was a core asset. Like, you can't transfer it. I worked in the Bronx at the time. And all that happened to me was I came in one day, and besides New York Telephone written on the door of my Digger Derrick line, 16-ton line truck, it said NYNEX. They just changed the paint on my door, the sign on my door. It was the only effective change I saw in the whole thing, personally. So,
Yeah, I can imagine that would be a huge undertaking. So that was in 84, let's just say. And so what year did you start working for Ma Bell?
1971.
1971. That was the year I was born, by the way, 1971. So that meant that for really only 13 years did you work for Ma Bell. And so, okay, that's interesting. And then, but you kept on working for them because you said you retired at 54,
Yes.
which means that you kept on working for them for another 20 years or so at NYNEX.
Well, yeah, NYNEX,
Is that right?
subsequently Bell Atlantic, Verizon. Um, I
Right.
retired from
Right. Because they
Verizon.
reconsolidated, right? They
Well,
remerged
yeah,
together after
you
some period
you
of
got to
time.
look at it that way. They did reconsolidate to a certain point. Um, the government at the time, they went after international business machines, IBM, and IBM fought them tooth and nail. The government threw up the white flag and just walked away, whereas AT&T started, we'll shake hands with the devil, we'll start negotiating in court. So, you know, that's what. But yeah, but
Okay. So, and then when did you get diagnosed with lead poisoning?
around 1987, 88. Yeah. Uh,
1987, 88. Okay.
See, there
So
was still
what
a lot
made
of.
you, like, how did you get diagnosed? Like, what was that like to, like, what's the physical experience of, like, having lead poisoning?
Well, I would get up every morning and I'd eat breakfast and vomit. I knew something was wrong. So I went to this doctor, this lady, and she ran all sorts of tests on me. And she said, Tom, I can't find anything wrong, but a test for lead is outside the normal realm of blood testing. You know what I mean? It's a specific industrial test, so to speak. So I didn't find out I had lead poisoning until I went for my annual company, uh, 9X physical, once a year physical, right? Go down to Manhattan to our medical office. And went down there, and 2 weeks later, my boss came out and said, hey, medical wants you down in the office again. And I said to my boss, I said, hey, look, I drink Budweiser, but I don't smoke pot or any of that stuff. He says, I don't know. They want you down there. And that's when they took a second blood test because the first blood test, they detected lead poisoning 2 weeks prior. So that's when by law, they were mandated to send it to the New York State Department of Health in Albany. But ethically or morally, they didn't have to tell me. So that's how I found out from the New York State Department of Health in Albany.
Wow, that's crazy. So, was that common for a lineman to get lead poisoning, or were you
Oh
kind of
yeah,
like a one-off?
and cable splicers too. Especially cable splicers that we used to encase splices with lead sleeves, and we would solder them airtight. If you're gonna leave something in the manhole, that manhole's gonna fill up with water like a swimming pool, guaranteed. So it has to be pressurized airtight. So we worked with lead quite a bit
So, didn't
and
they know
remove it.
back then, like in the 1980s or 1970s, that lead is toxic? I mean, like certainly people knew that back then.
Oh yeah, but don't forget, by this point, lead was possibly in the ground since 1910, 1920. So it, how can I say, it doesn't decay thoroughly, but it becomes like kind of porous. When you move it, there's a lead dust that comes up from it. When it's brand new, you don't have that much, unless you're cleaning the cable in order to wipe it. But if you are removing it, then you have a lot of lead dust in the air, and you breathe it in. Just
Yeah, well, wouldn't they have had you wearing protective suits and like respirators and gloves and all that? I mean, to work with lead, I mean, you would think that they would have known that.
well, they do now.
They
Unfortunately,
didn't know that in 19 because like the lead-based paint disclosure came out in 1978, right? So
right,
like it was no, I mean, I'm a realtor, I know, 1978 lead-based paint disclosure, right? I mean, and they got rid of lead in lead-based paint in 1978,
right.
so they must have
But
known it
but
for
that
years
that
before
was a
that, and here you
consumer
are
issue.
working with lead.
Right, that was a
Yeah, but
consumer
they
issue.
knew. I
It
mean, like it
wasn't an
was known that lead is
industrial issue
toxic.
like it was with me. An employment issue.
But like,
So
didn't you know that lead was toxic when you're out there working with these lead cables?
yeah, yeah, I did. I mean, every now and then I
And so
put on a
nobody like,
handkerchief, around my nose and my
uh-huh.
mouth. Like I look like a bandito sticking up a stagecoach. Um, but then at the end of the day, when you take it off, you would see all the black around where your mouth and your nose was. For the stuff it did filter out, especially down at the Second Avenue fire. There were PCB toxins in that building. I went in that building a year later, and I could still smell, the PCBs. They obviously cleaned it as best they could, but and they ventilated it as best they could. But you know, I guess we were the initial guinea pigs, so to speak, of the lead experiment. You know,
Well, that's shocking to me because like lead was known to be a toxin, and here you are working with it all day long, and they did not give you a respirator, or I mean, they give you a handkerchief. Really, I mean, like that just
no,
seems
I
pretty shocking.
supplied
It
my
seems
own
like there's a class
handkerchief.
action lawsuit. You supply your
Well,
own handkerchief. It seems like there's a class action lawsuit there waiting to happen. So how did they cure you of lead poisoning, or like what was that like?
well, I was just below the threshold, which was 50 parts per million, to be hospitalized. I was just below that. I probably, when I was really sick, getting up in the morning, throwing up, I was probably over 50%. By this time, I had been away from it for a few months. And what it basically does is the more liquid you drink, it leaves your system. You purify your system by yourself by drinking liquids. But,
So
eventually,
the cure is to drink water. Is just to
yeah.
drink lots of water and then
Yeah.
not get exposed to it anymore.
Exactly. Water is pure water is
All
the
right, well,
best
that's a
purifier.
pretty simple cure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we should all drink lots of water, especially as we get older. That's very important. But you had stage three lymphoma. Was that like because of the lead, you think, or what do they think that caused that?
I wish I knew. I mean, it was the only toxic
So,
substance I had in my body during my lifetime, but I can't definitively say. You know, cancer takes. There's a lag time to developing cancer. It develops over time. Years. We could
right,
have cancer cells in our body today that are developing that we won't find out for 5 or 10 years from now, once they've grown.
right.
Unfortunately, but
Right. So stage three is like so. Take us through the stages. There's stage one, two, and three, and four, right? I guess, and stage
yep.
four is like almost terminal, right? I guess, right? So like, what does stage three mean?
If I had stage four, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. I wouldn't have made it. I
Right.
barely
Yeah.
made
Right.
it back
Exactly.
from stage three, barely. But they saved me. They got me just in time. And
How did you find out that you had cancer? Like, were you feeling weak or sick or like what? How that diagnosis take place?
yeah, well, you know what happens? You go to see a primary care physician, and he sends you to a specialist, so to speak. And that specialist, says, no, we didn't find anything. But it was just lucky I had a friend who had recently graduated from Cornell Medical School. He was a physician's assistant. And I was over his house and I told him, I said, Ray, I've had this lump on my neck for over a year. And my God, he got so angry at me. He hit the roof. He says, why didn't you tell me about this? I said, well, Ray, you're only a physician's assistant. I've seen 2 medical doctors. He says, I don't care what they say. You should have told me. Now, he was young, fresh out of medical school. And it took him about 2.5 days because lymphoma is systemic. It's like the nerves in your body. It doesn't show up in your blood. Like if there's an organ that's misfunctioning in your body, your blood work will be unique to that organ, and it'll send the blood work off the chart. But with lymphoma, it's systemic. Blood doesn't show it. But he was finally able to, after working his head off deep into the dark night, he was able to figure it out. And so I found out he was the one that diagnosed me. He was the one that actually saved my life.
Wow. So you did chemotherapy for 4 months. Was there any other treatment? Was there like when you have a lymphoma, do they do radiation too? Because lymphoma is like blood cancer, right? So
Yes.
do they like do like radiation for that too, or is it
No,
just
I didn't
chemo,
need
or
radiation,
what else is
thank
the
God.
treatment like?
Well, the day you get chemo, you're fine. Absolutely fine. But then your white blood cells start dropping. All right? And the following day, and then 2 days after that, I used to call it going into the basement. I'd be at my all-time low. I'd be in bed. But then, that's why they had 3 weeks between treatments, because now your white blood cells will build back up, so when they give you the chemo, it doesn't kill you, you know. But it's truly a horrible disease. But thank God they
So you
saved me.
went like every 3 weeks for 4 months, which means that you only went like what 6 times? You had like
Six
six
times, yes.
infusions essentially for chemo,
Yep.
right? And then that was enough to kill the lymphoma.
But don't forget, medical doctors are scientists. They're basically scientists, very cautious. Okay. Now, my doctor, he had me take what you call a PET scan. It's nuclear medicine, right? X-rays, like a big, go into this big giant tunnel machine. And he had me take them beginning every 3 months, then it went to 6 months, then it went to once a year. And 5 years in, he got the last report, and he said, Tommy, I can confidently tell you now, if it hasn't come back in 5 years, you're cured. They're very cautious. They don't want to, anybody who says, I've heard guys, I've heard people tell me, oh, I had cancer, but they cured it. I go, wait a minute, you had cancer less than 2 years ago. How did they cure it in that time? And then 2 years later, they call me up to say, hey, I'm checking out. I'm calling to say goodbye. It came back. So if you get a cautious doctor, that's what you want. You don't want him telling you any good news until he is absolutely convinced himself that he has cured you.
So who paid for this? Was this from like a benefit of you having worked at the Bell Company, or was this
Absolutely.
like Medi-Cal, or I mean Medicare, or who paid for this?
Absolutely. My Verizon benefits. My Verizon medical
The
benefits. They were
Verizon
the
benefits
best.
paid for that.
They were the best in the world. Back then. I mean, it's still good. Don't get me wrong. I'm very thankful for what I have. But, you know, basically, I remember I used to get this once every 3 months. I'd have to go in and get this injection. And it was such a concentrated, minute, uh, some type of combination blood serum derivative. It was $3,300. $3,300 for one needle injection in my arm every 3 months. And Verizon paid for that, 100%.
So that's a pension benefit that you
Oh
get
my God.
from having worked there.
It's huge. It's huge, These days, I tell young people who are not getting a monthly pension anymore, they're taking a lump sum buyout when they retire. I remind them, your medical is still part of the pension plan. You didn't take all your chips off the table yet. You may think you did because you got this large, lump sum buyout, but your medical is very important, especially as you get older. Um, the only thing I used medical for when I was younger was the birth of my children. Really, My wife got pregnant, go to the doctor, go to the hospital, boom, bring the baby home, That
Right.
was the biggest cost that we, used the company medical for.
So does this Association of Belltell Retirees, which are you running it? Are you like the president, the chairman of the board? What is
I'm
your
the
actual
chairman.
title these
I'm
days?
the chairman of the board of directors. We have an all-volunteer board of directors. Nobody collects a single dollar in salary. We're just collective minds. We put our heads together if a problem arises, and we do it for the good of the good people that we worked for, because the one person can't do it themselves. Let me explain it to you this way. When I was in organizing school, a real veteran organizer, giving a lecture, took a box of spaghetti, and he took one thin strand of spaghetti out. And he says, watch how easy it is to break this strand of spaghetti. And he snapped the strand. Then he emptied the entire box into his two hands. And he says, I can't possibly break every strand of spaghetti that's bonded together. And that's what an association is. People bonding together for the good of each other.
So speaking of the good of each other, like, do you find that like these corporations like Verizon or whatever? I mean, like, are they constantly trying to like claw back some of those benefits that they promised you, like the medical care? And is that what your association does, or how does your association like look out for its members?
Well, there's certain things you can do. There's certain things beyond your control. But if we can think or devise a strategy or a tactic to, you know, some kind mediate compromise, the retirees and the employees benefits, then we give it a go. We give it a shot. I mean, we have, you know, attorneys on staff, um, that just are disciplined in these specific um, elements. Pensions, Medicare, medical benefits. Because don't forget, when you go on Medicare at 65, your corporate benefits become your secondary benefits. Medicare picks up 80%, the first 80%, and then your supplemental medical insurance, like Advantage Plan or something like that, picks up the last 20%. So the premiums go way down as far as corporations go. But then again, you're paying a premium every month out of your Social Security check to pay your Medicare premium, which I believe now is $185 a month. It's not bad. I mean, it's
Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad.
FDR. I'll tell you, FDR was the greatest president of the last 100 years since Abraham Lincoln. I mean, he did so much for our country. He had a vision that was way over the horizon. Getting us out of the Depression, getting us through World War II. I mean, just a brilliant guy. And a funny thing is, he came from old money, big wealth, here in upstate Hyde Park, New York. Usually the wealthy use their position as an advantage or an opportunity to exploit. Franklin Delano Roosevelt used his position of wealth for the needy, the Americans during the Depression, putting them to work, just civil conservation corps, building dams, roads, getting America back on its feet. He didn't exploit anything for himself. He didn't have to. He was born wealthy, but he did share his knowledge of how America should be with everyone. Like I said, the greatest president since Abraham Lincoln, in my opinion. You know.
Well, a lot of people say it was enlightened self-interest, right? Because like if he hadn't done that, the Marxists would have like taken over the country, right, essentially, and turned it into like like a Soviet state if they hadn't made serious reforms during the Depression. So I'd call it more like enlightened self-interest, I think. But it all worked out, I think, pretty well, and I agree. He certainly was a great president, no question about that in my mind. But you said earlier that like, hey, if you retire, what should you do next? And you suggested like volunteering and like serving on government committees. And your way of giving back is to be the chairman of the board of the Association of Belltell Retirees. I imagine that running or being the chairman of the board of an association of 130,000 members, that's probably a pretty demanding occupation, I guess. Like, so, I mean, do you see yourself like doing this for like the long term, or where do you see yourself going as chairman?
Well, I'll do it as long as I'm healthy enough to do it. Especially, as you get older, you could have great physical. Your body could be in great shape, but if you start losing it up here, I mean, sometimes I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I'll do it for as long as I can, but don't forget, I don't do it alone. I have a team, a board of directors, from the top, to the bottom. and you need all the parts of the puzzle to put the puzzle together. Just can't have the top part, management. You got to have the lower part, union craft also. Put the parts together, to create, the picture of the puzzle.
So, okay, I know that you have people helping you, right? But like a lot of people who are 76 might just say, I've done my part. I just want to play with my grandkids or, go on a cruise ship, for most of the year. Like what keeps you going, contributing and giving back, when you probably don't need to do that anymore?
My conscience. I worked with the greatest people in the world. I love them. And whatever I can do to help them, we actually help each other. I mean, don't forget, we're an ideal nonprofit. And what I mean by ideal, we have never accepted one single dollar of public money, grant money. All of our members donate to the association every year. Now, if every nonprofit in America was like us, you'd see double-digit tax decreases, because there is no free ride, it's self-sustaining. That's what I'm saying. We are a self-sustaining, ideal nonprofit.
Yeah, well, that's pretty amazing that you're a self-sustaining ideal nonprofit. That is pretty unique because I know a lot of nonprofits are constantly like fundraising is their primary occupation. Really is fundraising more than advocacy or any of the other work that they do. I happen to know. So we kind of need to wrap things up here. But if you wanted to give any advice to somebody who maybe has retired after a long career and they're fishing about what to do next. What do you think people should start with? I mean, you mentioned like volunteering on city committees. Anything else come to mind? I mean, nonprofit work. What do you recommend?
Well, just basically that's it. Volunteering for public service in your community, your church, place of worship. There's a lot of retiree groups that form, the major companies like, IBM, GM, Verizon, there are company groups that you can join. Pick up a hobby. I don't pick up a hobby, go fishing, take your grandchildren fishing. Just, you have the luxury of time. It's the one thing you have that you never had before. I'll tell you, I'll wrap it up, Sebastian, with this. I never had a single bad day in a telephone company. Not one. I did have a bad 5 minutes one time when I walked into a 3-man stick-up team in a delicatessen. Wow. When you have 3 pistols pointed at you, wow, pay attention to listen to what they're saying. And I'll never forget the detectives came and they said, "Can you give us a description?" I said, "Absolutely. 1 revolver and 2 semi-automatics." I wasn't looking at their face. I was looking at the barrel of their guns. A true story. Yep. 1 revolver and 2.
Well, there you go.
So
there you go. All right. Well, terrific. Well, that's an interesting little story. All right. Well, listen, Tommy, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I really do appreciate it. And if people want to reach out to you and just pick your brain or just benefit from your wisdom, what's the best way they can reach you?
Just go to our website, the Association of Belltell Retirees. You Google it, we will come right up top. And just click on that. Read our newsletters. We put up quarterly newsletters, 4 times a year. And they're there. Just click on what quarter you want to read or read all of them. If you have a question, our office numbers are on there. We have a fully staffed office in Cold Spring Harbor in Long Island, New York. Call our office. We'll help you any way we can. You know, maybe.
All right, but if they want to reach you personally, is there a way to get you personally, like you have an email address or?
Oh yeah, you can email tmsteed@hotmail.com, or you can call me 914-213-5909. You know.
All right, perfect. Well, I hope somebody does reach out to you because you really are exemplifying, I think, the way that people can continue to, be contributing to, society at large. And I think a lot of people worry that, they can't, there's no point in what they're doing, really, And I think that you're showing that you certainly can, even though you may have had like a small job at a big, huge corporation, right? Later on in life, you can certainly have like an outsized impact. And I think you're really showing that very well for anyone who's watching today.
Yeah, I mean, give until you feel good. That's what I'd say. Volunteer, donate, give until you feel good. When your conscience feels good, you're going to be fine. You're going to be good,
All right. Well, that is a great way to wrap things up. Tommy, thank you so much for being on the call. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you on the flip side. All right, that's a wrap for this episode of 60 Plus Uncensored. Huge thanks to Tommy Steed for setting the tone with such honesty and insight. Now, if you like this episode, do me a favor, do Tommy a favor, hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and then share it with someone you know who needs to hear it. Oh, and by the way, if you know anyone over 60 who's still out there doing big things, living boldly, working with purpose, or just aging on their own terms like Tommy Steed, I would love to hear from you. Reach out at team60plus.com or join the conversation on Reddit at 60 Plus Uncensored. I'm Seb Fry, and this is 60 Plus Uncensored, because as we're learning, life after 60 isn't the end, it's just getting good.
Subscribe now.